Hi, everybody. How are you? Hello, Melissa.
Hey, Jackie, how are you?
Great. How's the job going?
Oh, good. It's busy, but it's good.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so glad. You still working for the state?
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. We need you. That's great. That's good. Looks like you got some new office digs, huh?
Mhm.
Did you get some new office digs?
Office space?
Yeah, new office digs, I said. Did you get some new office?
Oh, yeah, I switched rooms in the house.
Good.
So
Change of scene.
change of scene. Yeah.
Nice. That's great. Whole new leaf. Whole new leaf.
Yeah.
Looks like we have Jeff and Brian. And there's Mark. Hi, Vince. How are you?
Afternoon, all.
Yep. I hear. Is that you, Mark, or Vince?
Yep.
One of you spoke. Okay, there you
Yeah,
go.
no, that's Mark. Yeah.
Good. Good. And we have Brian and Greg. Well, I guess we have a quorum. We're just missing Ernie, I think. I'm not sure who the phone is, but
Hi there.
that's you, Linda. Hi. How are you, Linda? I recognize your phone.
Great. Thank you.
Linda is our member of the public for Mark and Vince's edification. And how are you, Rod?
Good, thanks.
Okay, great. Excellent. All right, we're just missing Ernie. Anybody want to let him know we're meeting? Jeff, do you have a number for him by any chance? Can you text him or something just to make sure he knows? That's great. And in the meantime, I thought maybe, I know we need to approve our agenda. Rod, is it kosher for us to introduce one another before we approve the agenda?
Sure.
I think that would be the
I think
kind
it's-
thing to do.
I think it's probably politer than not.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
In the name of kindness, we're going to introduce ourselves.
I'm not sure if Robert's rules is that kind, but you should.
It's true. It's true. Mark and Vince, I just want to welcome you here to our Planning Commission. We're so pleased you can join us. I know we have met previously, so I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Welcome. It's great to have you here. I'm Melissa Horwitz. I live on Spur Lane off of Four Wheel Drive. I've been on the Planning Commission. This is my second term. So maybe 6-7 years. I've lived in Norwich, I think going on about 12 years now. Been in the Upper Valley for about 14 years. So that is me, and welcome.
Thanks, Melissa. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Jeff Goodrich, Goodrich Four Corners. I've lived here about 60 years. My family's been here centuries.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Brian, are you with us yet? Or were you otherwise disposed?
I'm here, Jackie,
Yeah.
to quote my 5-year-old.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, okay.
It just said the meeting is going on at dinner time. And I
Oh,
said, "Yes." So I'm here, but
Thank you.
I'll turn the camera on in a bit.
Thank you for joining us, Brian. You'll all have a chance to meet Brian soon. That's great. Vince, you want to introduce yourself?
There we go. Oh, hi, I'm Vince. I'm new here. I live on Beaver Meadow, fairly close to town, pretty much across the way from the Huntley cul-de-sac kind of thing. Yeah, I'm excited to get started and get more involved in town.
Thanks, Vince. Mark?
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, all. My name is Mark Aquila. I live on New Boston Road with my wife, 2 kids who are 7 and 9, so first and third grade at Marion Cross, and been here 12 years. A half a second or a century, depending on your perspective, relative. Anyway, guys, thanks for obviously appointed by the select board, but thanks for having me join you. Look forward to working with you guys and getting to know you over the upcoming year.
Great, thanks. Okay, and Rod, does everyone know you? If you had a chance to meet Mark and Vince, I'm not sure if you have. Yeah.
I know I've not met Mark and Vince in person. I'm Rod. I'm the town manager and the planning director and the ZA today. So that's me. Been working in the town of Norwich since 2018 and working in municipal government in Vermont since 2008. So welcome. It's good to see some new faces. Thank you.
Yeah, great. All right. So the first item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. And do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Sure.
Thanks,
First
Mark.
motion out of the way. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. Good work. And are there any discussion or changes? Okay. Right. We can have a vote then. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand.
I for me, Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Jeff, do you want to do, how do you vote?
Nay.
Nay? Okay, all right. Okay, our agenda is approved, 5-1. And here comes Ernie. Wait for him to connect so we can go on to the, I guess we can ask for public comment while Ernie's connecting. Do we have any comments from the public? I know Linda is on and a face I don't know without a name is also joined us. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I apologize if for some reason the name isn't showing up on my screen, but there you are. Hi. I think you're on mute, but welcome to the Planning Commission.
Stephen Bauer.
Hi, Stephen. How are you? Hey, we
Yeah.
just approved our agenda for the meeting, and we are now about to have public comment. So if you and Linda are our 2 members of the public that have attended, would you like to make a comment on anything that's not on the agenda?
I have nothing.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Yes.
So
you are a guest. Oh, I didn't recognize you.
Jackie,
Sorry.
Stephen is the nominee for zoning administrator. So there you go.
Okay. Sorry, we haven't met. I
That's okay.
apologize. Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
that's
Glad
okay.
you're here. Glad you're here. Linda, any comment? If not, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda.
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, thanks, Linda. All right, so our
Thank
next
you.
item, did Ernie join us yet, or is he still trying to connect? There he is. Hi, Ernie. How are you? Ernie, I think you're on mute. Thank you. Yep, still on mute. It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard. No, still can't hear you. Okay. I wonder, okay, he's gonna go do something. All right. All right, well, let's see. Our next item, we were gonna welcome new members, which we've done, and then elect officers. I think we should wait for Ernie. What do you think? Okay, all right, let's do that. Heads are nodding. If not, we could move to our next item. Does anyone have a preference while Ernie gets set up? Any preference? Is that okay? All right. Any objection to moving to our next item so that Ernie can participate? All right. Okay. So let's just move to item 4 and then we'll come back to item 3. Item 4 is a recommendation of a zoning administrator, / acting zoning administrator for select board appointment. This is, I guess, a procedure that is, Rod, I'm not sure where the procedure comes from, but I guess somebody wrote it
Yeah,
down.
okay.
Somebody
So,
wrote down
yeah.
a procedure. And I just want to say that it's, the way this works is we make a motion to recommend that the select board approve an acting zoning administrator. So Rod, why don't you fill us in on the details that I'm missing? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Jackie. So for everybody, particularly the new people, the role and function of the Planning Commission and zoning administrator is laid out in state statute, and state statute provides for the process for appointing a zoning administrator. The zoning administrator is employed by the town, but reports directly to the select board well, let me just, no, scratch that. The zoning administrator has the independence to make decisions as long as those decisions are consistent with the local land use regulations and statute. And a person or a property owner subject to a decision of the zoning administrator may appeal that decision in the first instance to the Development Review Board, and then proceed through the legal system to the Environmental Division of the Supreme Court of the state of Vermont. So procedurally, the zoning administrator reports to the town manager in HR matters and in other matters to do with the performance of their work, but they enjoy a degree of independence from the town manager with regard to the actual decision-making of their job. To encode that independence, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Select Board to appoint a zoning administrator, and then the Select Board acts on that recommendation of the Planning Commission. And so tonight we have before us Stephen Bauer from Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission, where he's employed, and we are under contract with Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission for them to provide access to Stephen on a 1 day per week basis, while we are in the process of finding a permanent part-time zoning administrator. So I'm happy to take any questions about how that process works. And I'm happy for Stephen to correct me on any of the details, but I think that that's pretty much the outline.
Okay, thanks, Rod.
And I think, yeah, and I think Ernie has just managed to join. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing it, but I'm experiencing kind of this really weird, shaky Zoom interface where it keeps on flashing at me and doing weird stuff and is really bulky, up to and including not sort of recognizing my mouse and the recording button flashing on and off. So I don't know if anybody else is experiencing really lousy Zoom.
You are too, Jeff? You're having a hard time?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm not, but I don't know what,
Okay.
I have no
Okay,
idea.
well, I'm going to persist until it gets much worse, but
Can everyone hear me first before we go?
Yes, yes.
Yep.
we can.
hi, Ernie. So yeah, I just thought I should let you know.
Do you want to zoom in and zoom out or whatever they call it?
If I go, I'm not sure how, I don't know. I'm the host, so it's a bit weird for me to
Oh, okay.
leave. I don't know. Let's just see how it goes.
All right. Okay, or
Okay.
maybe try turning off your screen. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what they say when you're in these meetings. So, okay.
Okay.
Steve, welcome. Glad you're here. Do you want to talk to us about your role and your relationship with Two Rivers and how this and where else you've been? Just tell us more about you. Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so my role at Two Rivers as it comes to zoning has been more of a policy standpoint, and that's really more so been looking at how to throughout the region more so shape ordinances and shape bylaws so they're more modernized. But the way that has helped me in actually serving as this temporary role, because right now I'm serving already as the temporary zoning administrator in both Woodstock and Randolph. So that it's kind of twofold. It's one, my background in land use planning, because I have my JD from Vermont Law School. My wife and I moved here to go so I could go to Vermont Law School, and so my background is in land use regulation. And so I've utilized that in actually drafting and advocating for things throughout the region. But also I have a lot of background in actually being able to just go through the land use regulation process. So helping the town be able to still work through the permitting process. That's mainly what I'm focused on right now.
Okay. And you mentioned you're working with Woodstock and Randolph. Are those new assignments? Have you been working there for a period of months, or how does that go?
Yeah, so as of Randolph, I'm just in my second week of work with them. Woodstock has, so they're working also on finding a full-time zoning administrator. So I've been there for about a month.
Great, thank you. Why don't we go around the table and see if there are other questions? Mark, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, this actually might be for Rod, but Stephen, if you know, awesome. If for some reason we don't appoint you, I assume we have no one in the job. And if we do appoint you, does that give you authority to access things that you don't currently have, or what? I'm just unfamiliar with the process of we appoint you and then something happens. I assume that's when your contract starts, but I don't know.
Rod, I'm happy to answer that unless you want to.
Why don't you take a start, Stephen, and then I'll fill in some other details. Yeah.
No, that's fine. So that's a great question. So the process kind of goes as it's so from the planning commission is actually a nomination. So like you were saying, Mark, my actual contract starts once the select board appoints me. So the planning commission's role in this is nominating me as the person. But yes, you're correct. You're correct in the fact that I guess it's weird to say, like, if you don't nominate me tonight, that doesn't mean that there is no chance of finding a zoning administrator. It's just that I wouldn't be able to take that role then at the select board. So the select board wouldn't be able to appoint me without your nomination.
Yeah, we're trying to fill a gap because we haven't been able to hire anybody. We've been advertising this position since January, I think, Rod, something like that, or
Not that
December.
long. So just to be clear, because in my past position as the planning director, I was also the zoning administrator. So I'm currently the appointed zoning administrator. But once I assumed the position of town manager, we just needed to reorganize the town staffing. And so rather than try and hire a planner and zoning administrator into one person, we decided to opt for trying to find a part-time zoning administrator and a full-time planner. So currently the town can't, because the town's got zoning, we can't be without a zoning administrator. The issue is that I'm the zoning administrator and I'm the town manager. There's a potential for a conflict there to some extent, but luckily that hasn't come up yet. And the bigger issue for me is I'd like to sleep more than 5 hours at a time. So, which is an option I'm looking for. So in terms of access to the information, once assuming Stephen is nominated by you and then appointed by the select board, he'll be able to access our paper files and he'll be present in person 1 day a week. And then he'll be able to access the server and other digital files as well. So, obviously we'll be working closely together to make sure that he's got the information that he needs. But the key here, I guess, is that we do still have me as a zoning administrator. The decision that the select board is going to encounter tomorrow night is when they if they appoint Stephen zoning administrator, that what they have a choice of either making him the acting zoning administrator or the zoning administrator, the full-time zoning administrator, and then I would probably assume the role of acting zoning administrator so that in Stephen's absence, I could still make a decision as a zoning administrator, which is fairly typical in small towns in Vermont, that the
Yeah.
town manager is the acting zoning administrator. In fact, my predecessor, Herb Durfee, the previous town manager, was also the acting town manager. So that, I mean, the acting zoning administrator, so that when I was absent, he could make those decisions. So I hope that clears that up.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Rod. Appreciate it. Thanks, Stephen.
Melissa, any questions for Stephen?
I don't.
Okay, all right. We go around Vincent. All right, Jeff, any questions?
Yeah, I don't have questions. I'm going to vote no based on the Vermont statutes annotated, the law, if you will, with respect to notice, et cetera. I appreciate Two Rivers greatly. I don't know Stephen, but I would welcome him if there were a proper notice period for the public to engage and for us to engage as a planning commission.
Okay, thanks. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Welcome, Stephen. I don't have any questions. I would just encourage you, if you're nominated and ultimately appointed, to share as a member of the public your perceptions of our rules from your experience, however brief it may be, as that's our current, major work stream. So, yeah, so please stay in touch if this role becomes yours.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brian.
Yeah. So in sort of a benchmarking role, Brian, or just to provide that feedback, yeah, that would be helpful. That's good. Okay. Ernie, any comments or questions here?
Well, I'm in agreement with Jeff. I'm not sure if I'm going to vote no or anything, but I'm disturbed by the lack of notice too. I mean, we didn't get any resume, no nothing. Not that I haven't had a chance to read it if we did get it. So, it is very short notice, and that there's something not right about such short notice about something so important. That said, I also have a question. Will the zoning administrator be involved in the actual drafting of the new regulations, or is that a different role for somebody else?
I wouldn't think so, but Rod would answer that better. Go ahead.
So under statute, Ernie, it's the planning commission that's responsible for the development and writing of land use regulations. And there's a particular process laid out for that, which requires adequate public hearings as the planning commission, and then a decision to move the draft document forward to the select board, where the process is repeated in terms of public hearings, and then the select board votes on it. So it's similar in the adoption process to the town plan in that regard. And so while we're on that topic,
that brings up another question then, because that's not how we've been proceeding. I mean, we've been working on it. The town plan, whatever your role was, has been changed to, I don't know if it's zoning administrator or town or planning director at this point. But whatever, we've been working with you to get the regulations drafted.
right.
So
I understand that. I would say that
that's my question is,
you've been working with me in my capacity as a planning director. It does present a challenge, but because I'm the same person. But in my support of the planning commission from the outset, it's been clear that I've been working in the function of planning director, which is customary. And we've also engaged with the Development Review Board, which is not required under statute, but is encouraged as a good planning practice. And so I think I would emphasize that ultimately the process is that the planning commission has to be content with the draft document that they develop, and move that process forward through public hearings and making any necessary amendments and then submitting it to the select board, which then repeats that public outreach process. And while we're at it, I'm not aware of any restrictions in statute that reference a period of notice for making recommendations or nominations to the select board to replace a zoning administrator. And it's somewhat customary because of its nature of an employment position that the town manager typically hires or retains somebody to fulfill the role of the zoning administrator. And then the planning commission, as a matter of formality, makes that nomination to the select board, and the select board considers the nomination because it's still, it's a paid position. So it's very difficult to recruit somebody saying, look, I don't know how this is going to work out. In a month from now, you're going to go before the select board or the planning commission, and then they're going to decide whether they like you or not. And after that, you're going to go to the select board and they might like you or not. Customarily, you offer somebody a position based on their qualifications and experience, and then you move that nomination forward. So it's a difficult area of statute to negotiate in that regard, but there are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no notice requirements associated with it. And lastly, we're under contract with Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission, and Stephen is their staff person that's been assigned. So, and that was something that as town manager, I was able to negotiate.
Okay.
Thanks, Rod. I just want to move us along here. Jeff, I know you have your hand up, and then Mark, but just before we do all that, Vincent, did you have any comments or questions? Because we haven't heard from you yet. Yeah.
I was just kind of curious, I guess, maybe for Rod, about just kind of the history of how the position of town planner and zoning administrator was kind of split. And is that the plan going forward, or once there's a new town planner in place, is there a possibility that this could revert to the way that it was?
Very quickly, the decision to separate the position out was based on an idea, some thought that I had while I was actually in the role as planning director and zoning administrator simultaneously, and reflects my interest in structuring that position differently to achieve different things. Basically to, in recognition of the amount of planning work that needs to be done, particularly around the land use regulations and other issues, and the balance between the zoning administrative function and the planning function. So it's a very cumbersome and challenging job for one person. It's not necessarily a full-time position for the zoning. In fact, it's definitely not a full-time position for the zoning administrator, but it is a full-time position for the planner. And so it was in recognition of that set of facts that we decided to structure it this way this time. We have had absolutely no success attracting any attention to the zoning administrative position in its current form, and that's not unusual. And the fact that Stephen is working 1 or 2 days a week for 3 towns in the region tells you something about the number of people that got the requisite skills and experience to do the work, and also the workload that he could reasonably be the zoning administrator for 3 towns in a week, and that not be too much. Also is indicative of the level of development and the workload that's out there. So I think in some ways it's a confirmation of the soundness of the decision to have a part-time zoning administrator, but the challenge comes, are we ever going to find one apart from Stephen? Mm-hmm. And so we're happy to have Stephen, that's good, but that's sort of not what we really planned. And I would think it would be interesting for me to talk as a town manager to the town managers in Woodstock and Randolph and get a better sense of the lie of the land.
Thanks, Rod. Jeff, you had something, and then Mark?
Yeah, so several things. I don't know Stephen, and I appreciate the notice, the notion that, let me step back. So I appreciate the fact that the town has a relationship with Two Rivers, and I accept that as something positive. as a planning commission, I would like to see the information about how we might engage someone and see the planning commission contemplate how we might engage that person before we take any steps forward. I would like to return to a place where the planning commission makes decisions about how we proceed forward, as opposed to what I would describe as something else. That said, I want to also appreciate what Rod said with respect to the planning commission's role with respect to zoning ordinances and regulations, and hope that the planning commission will again resume the role of taking the lead in developing these documents, as opposed to where we've been in the last couple of years.
Mark, you're next.
All right, the dog may participate in this comment. I apologize in advance. He's barking at something, probably a squirrel. Sorry, Rod, I just want to make sure my first meeting, I'm going to try not to screw it up too much. And this is just recorded, so I'm glad I didn't swear. I just want to confirm. So the select board appoints us, you report to the select board. We're supposed to appoint this role, who then reports to you. Did I get that circular thing right? No. Okay, sorry. I'm just trying to follow along. Like I know it's confusing, and this is my first meeting, so I want to make sure I know what it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I thought the select board appoints us. Like that's for sure.
Yep. You got
Okay,
that
that's why
part
I'm
right.
here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you don't report to the select board?
I do.
You do. Okay, good. So then, but now we're going to appoint Stephen, who reports to you, but we're going to appoint him to the select board.
No, not quite. There's some subtle distinctions that I want to bring in here.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. So you're asked to nominate a candidate for the position of zoning administrator.
Got it.
And that's what we're discussing. And then the select board takes the action. So I don't appoint the zoning administrator as town manager.
Okay.
The select board does. And that in a way is making concrete that that the zoning administrator enjoys independence from me in their conduct of their official duties as a zoning administrator. So if Stephen was late or dressed inappropriately or, you know, flagrantly disrespectful to the photocopier, then the as town manager, I have the ability to ask that he modify his behavior and ultimately discipline him for that, although setting aside the question that he's under contract with Two Rivers. So all those kinds of typical manager worker functions remain intact. I, as town manager, cannot go to Stephen and say, look, Melissa's a really good friend of mine, and I don't want any aggravation from you about her application for a new carport. So let's just get this done. That's not appropriate. And he can say, it's my role as a zoning administrator to make a decision without influence or pressure from you, and you're being inappropriate. So that's what the very convoluted structure is meant to protect and represent. So the whole question in statute of the role of the planning commission kind of doesn't envisage or imagine that there's a town manager that's going to recruit and hire a person for the job of zoning administrator. That is my job as town manager. And then that person has due process rights as an employee, or at least as a candidate as an employee. And as I explained before, it gets really convoluted and complicated to try and hire somebody on the possible promise of maybe having a job when what you really want is somebody to do the job. So that's the conundrum that we're trying to work our way through here. I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah, and thank you, Rod. I appreciate it. I appreciate you took the extra time to explain it. I can see where I got hung up. I know how hard it is to hire folks for anything right now, in not just in the Upper Valley, but anywhere. So I understand the challenge. I have no questions. Ernie might, but I'm happy to move forward with like we nominate you to be nominated.
Yes.
Ernie might have a question.
Yes, exactly.
I think I know what's
Ernie, is your hand up again? I wasn't sure if it was
Yes.
from before. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I understand things correctly. What Rod was saying was that in terms of whoever and whatever position we have, from here on out, it's expected that the planning commission themselves are going to drive the entirety of the regulation drafting and issue things like that. Do I understand that correctly?
What I would say there, Ernie, is that we're going to follow the process that people have agreed to, which is that draft sections will be developed and distributed and comments will be received.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Then my question is, who's going to be drafting, who's going to provide those first drafts that we are going to review and comment on?
Me in the role as planning director.
Okay, so the zoning administrator has no role in that at all.
No.
Okay. That's my.
Thanks for clarifying that. Thanks for clarifying that, Ernie. That's helpful. All right, do we have a motion? Mark, want to make a motion to recommend Stephen Bauer to the zoning administrator, acting zoning administrator for the select board?
I say that, yes. I nominate, hold on, sorry, Stephen. I nominate Stephen to be nominated to the select board for the interim zoning administrator.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
Did we say it right?
I'm too carried away. It's
No.
my first meeting. I'll
Yeah.
be quiet.
Yeah, that's okay. So how about we try somebody moving to nominate Stephen Bauer to the position of zoning administrator or acting zoning administrator to the select board as they deem appropriate.
As the select board deems appropriate, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Can you live with that, Mark? Or Brian, you have your hands up? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just one question related to the potential motion. Stephen, if you win the lottery, do we have to start this process over? Or can Two Rivers slot in your replacement without repeating this process? Like if Stephen gets appointed in like his name, is that fundamentally different than appointing Two Rivers as designee?
Do you mean, Brian, if I were to disappear
Yes.
and Two Rivers needed to find somebody else, you would have to go through this process again, same way that you'd have to go through this process again when finding a new person.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we do want Stephen's name in this. That's what you were asking, Brian? Okay. All right. So then is Mark's motion then acceptable? Do we need to hear it again? I don't want to put you on the spot, Mark.
I could try to say it again if you want.
Go ahead.
But all right, so I move to nominate Stephen Bauer as the zoning administrator, subject to the select board's approval.
Yeah,
Close.
as they deem appropriate.
As they deem appropriate.
Okay.
I'm trying. Sorry,
You're
guys.
doing-
I'm trying.
You're doing great. Do we have a second? Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
Do we have any more discussion? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I would just say to Rod, I share Jeff's concern about the suddenness and would hope that in the future there are similar like personnel issues that need our involvement. Like we just be looped in a bit earlier so we can talk about our role and how we can be more helpful. I'm planning to vote in favor of the motion, but that doesn't mean I don't share Jeff's concern.
Okay. Ernie, you have another comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say I agree with Brian as well. And I want to add just a little bit. I think it would be much preferable to have a lot more information, a resume, stuff like that in front of us. Not just a quick interview. This, like I said, I understand the need for this. I understand why, there's a bit of pressure, and I'm going to accept that and work with it. But I'm not liking this process at all. And I hope it never happens again.
Go ahead, Rod.
So there's some circumstances, obviously, with this situation that are different. I would want to say that if we had applicants applying for the position, then I would have looked to have the planning commission, a member of the planning commission on the interview panel to meet the applicant or applicants. But in this instance, the way it was organized was through a contract with Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah,
So
Yeah, I
So
mean, Rod, I
what
mean,
I'd say-
we're relying on Two Rivers to have done the vetting, basically, which is fine. I mean, we understand that that's
so
what
it's a,
the
co-
role
it's a,
is.
it's,
and
it's a
they're good
contract,
at
it's a
that.
contract, it's a contract relationship with
Yeah.
with
We're relying on
provider.
Two Rivers is what we're doing.
Exactly. And if we were employing Stephen directly, we would
Right.
interview him, and a member of the planning commission will be part of the interview panel. And that's that's the undertaking I would give to any other candidate that steps forward.
Right. But in this case, it's Two Rivers' responsibility to hire the right
Right.
person.
It's like hiring through an agency.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay. Jeff, you had one more comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely disagree. I think at the end of the day, while I respect Two Rivers entirely,
Mhm.
I think if the planning commission is going to have a role, then the planning commission needs to have a role, not what is transpiring before us.
Mhm.
I think town manager picking and choosing folks for committees, whether they have experience or not, in my experience has been that most of the members in the selection committees have very little experience. That has nothing to do with the planning commission choosing or being involved in a process by which folks may be engaged. And I would like us to engage in a very active and personal role going forward, as opposed to submitting to others.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Thanks, Jeff. So we have a second. Are we ready to vote? Why don't we do by roll call, okay? Mark,
I'll vote in favor.
Melissa,
Yes. Favor.
Vince,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes, for me.
Ernie,
Aye.
and then Jeff,
Yay.
and I vote yes. Okay. All right, thanks for that. I think we can move on to our item number 3 on the agenda. We're going backwards, Ernie. We wanted to wait for you for this one. Since I know you're having trouble connecting, it's time to elect our officers for the coming year. And we'll be electing a chair, a vice chair, and in the past, we've had a clerk, we haven't had a clerk, so we can talk about what we want to do there. So I guess the first order of business is we will elect a chair. And before we just do that, Ernie, did everybody meet Ernie? Vince and Mark? We had introductions before you got there, so this is Ernie.
Mark actually introduced himself to me.
Oh, good. Okay.
And
All
so
right.
I appreciate that greatly.
All right. All
And
right.
Vince, I'm not going to hold it against you, that
Okay.
was special anyway, so.
All right. So
looking forward
that's
to working with both of you.
all right. That got done, and you see Vince on the screen, so that's great. Okay, good. So do we have any nominations for chair? Or does anybody would like to serve as chair? Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, Ernie, I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
She asked if anyone would like to serve, and I raised my hand in response.
Okay. Thanks, Ernie. Brian?
Yeah, I don't plan to serve. As the current vice chair, I've seen the level of work involved, and it's just not something that I could take on personally at this time. That said, I know when we did the last election, and Jackie, you ran for chair at that time. We had a conversation about how long you would serve again in that role. And, I know that that you serving another term might be an issue for some folks. But that said, I've had the pleasure of working alongside you as the vice chair for this, my first time. And I've been impressed with not just, your ideas and your thoughtfulness, but your willingness to really do the work. And that's what this job takes. And so I'm really open to having that conversation about doing this multiple times in succession, but to make that conversation possible, I'm happy to nominate you if you're willing to continue.
Thanks, Brian. No job too tough here. Yeah, I mean, it's always my hope. I always think we want to bring people along and have as many leaders as possible. I think that's good for the organization. Jeff, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. When Jackie was first nominated, I was the person who first nominated her for chair. Fast forward to last year, Jackie said she would serve one more term as chair. So in that context, I'd like to nominate Ernie as chair.
Anybody else? Okay. 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 Shall we have a vote then? Call the question? We have 2 nominations on the table. Go ahead, Mark.
Since you're both nominated, can you each maybe talk for a second about
Sure.
what you see as the primary role of the chair?
Ernie, you want to talk?
Okay, yeah, I take the job of chair and the job of being on the planning commission really seriously. Having spent 15 years on the development review board, right from its inception to until I got this position. So I know where the efforts of the how the efforts of the planning commission are applied. And I'm very sensitive to how the development review board has to deal with what policies we develop. I'm also very strongly committed to making sure that our process remains very deliberative. I do not want to see it devolve into something where text is put in front of us and we really either rubber stamp it and say yay or nay. I think that the planning commission should have a substantial contribution to the language of the regulations. And finally, my credentials as a strong environmentalist, I'm very concerned about climate change. I understand the sciences, a lot of the earth sciences that are involved here. And so I'm very concerned about, for instance, forest blocks and farming, and also conserving or preserving those functions of the land. So those are the primary drivers for me for wanting to be on the planning commission and also to be the chair. So that's basically where you have it.
Thanks, Ernie. I guess for my part, I see the role of the chair is to help set the direction, engage people to the extent possible to participate, whether that be the planning commission members themselves or members of the public. We're trying to get more people interested in our work. And then, yeah, I guess helping with follow-up, making sure we're, doing what we said we were going to do. In 2020, we got our town plan adopted. So, making sure we're paying attention to our responsibilities in that plan. I know one complaint I hear, in many other circles that, we set a plan that goes in the drawer and nothing happens to it. That's always a concern that organizations have. And so I'm very interested in engaging our community, in that plan and seeing if we can't move the agenda forward. And that's what I like to do with the planning commission. Those are my objectives. Okay.
Thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Shall we have, I guess, call to question? I guess, how do we do this? We just call the names, or what do we do? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the first motion that Brian made was on your behalf, Jackie. So I would submit that by Robert's rules, that takes precedent. And so if there's a second, we need to rule on that or decide on that
Gotcha,
before we can
okay.
take any further steps.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Okay. All right, so we had a motion from Brian to nominate me, and then Jeff, we had a motion from you to nominate Ernie. So let's get a second first for the motion to nominate me. Is that the way we do it?
Yeah,
Okay.
my motion for Ernie is not relevant until we resolve the motion for you.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good information. It's very helpful. Okay, do we have a second then for Brian's motion? Thank you. Oh,
I'll
all right.
second.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. All right, so then I guess let's do a rule. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, if we can have a little discussion, hopefully you don't hear screaming in the background. So I would just say in support of my motion, thanks, Jeff, for sharing your concerns about the number of terms. You know, given my experience as the vice chair, I'll just say more explicitly than what I said a few minutes ago. I think Jackie's really good at this job, which is keeping us focused on tasks from the town plan and encourage and getting people interested in the work of the Planning Commission. I've seen her put in the work. I've seen her attract folks to our work. I look forward to working more with her in this role. So Ernie, I think you're great for a million reasons, but I plan to vote in favor of this motion because I've just seen how good Jackie is in such a difficult job.
Thanks, Brian. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm not concerned about number of terms. I am concerned about what we pledge to one another.
Mhm.
I'm also concerned about the dynamic I perceive, without looking back too far, with the Planning Commission and how folks, both publicly and on the commission, have been treated, which I think has been ameliorated in the past few months with respect to a more collegial and considerate environment, which did not precede those months from my perspective. So my main goal would be to see a chair who would engage the commission about making decisions about how the commission's going to go forward in accordance with the law and proceed accordingly.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the table. How do you vote? Jeff, you want to start us off?
Nay.
Melissa?
Yes.
Vince?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes, for me.
Okay, Mark?
I'll vote yes.
Ernie?
Nay.
And I'll abstain. Okay. So we have 4-1. All right. Okay. Okay. So, all right, well, I hope we can, this wasn't my plan, but I hope we can move together as a team. Can we make this, I guess today is the first day of the rest of our lives, so maybe we can make this more collegial and try to make everybody happy. That's the goal. I know it's pretty tough, but that's the goal. Okay. Why don't we move to the next item of our agenda, and I thank you for your support, which is our draft of the land use regulations. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do the other elections. Is that what you were going to say, Jeff?
Yes, it is. And I think
Thank you.
Brian has done an excellent job as vice chair.
Right.
And to the extent he's available for that role, I'd like to nominate him.
Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
Great. Okay. And I agree. He's a terrific, I couldn't say more good things about him, Jeff. I agree with you. He's been a great partner. So do we have any other discussion about Brian or any other nominations? Anyone else interested in vice chair? Okay. If not, we'll call to question.
I'm happy to do it
Oh,
again.
good. I forgot to ask.
I
Yeah.
enjoy it. I think, you know, what I'd say for our new members is it's a great way to learn how things work, the process, not just the content, and you have very little responsibility. So even if neither of you, Vince or Mark, wants to take this on this time around, I'd encourage you to think about it next time.
Yeah, it is a great way to learn. I agree with that. Okay. All right. So any other discussion? Not Jeff, how do you vote?
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Vince,
Yes.
Brian,
I abstain.
Mark,
Yes.
Ernie? Was that an aye? I think you're on mute, but I read your lips. Okay, thank you. And I vote aye. I vote aye. Great. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess that was 6 and 1 abstention. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so then the last position, speaking of a great way to learn, is clerk. And that is definitely a good way to learn. I guess I've done it once for this organization when Phil was with us. I've done it for other groups, and you got to focus the mind and pay attention when you're the clerk. And so it's very helpful from that perspective, a good way to learn. So do we have anyone that would be interested in that role to help out with this task? Go ahead, Brian.
Not me, certainly not me. But the main job is doing the minutes, and that's a job that Rod has taken on. And so
Yeah.
perhaps before anyone nominates themselves or someone else, should ask Rod if he's comfortable continuing in that role, because it's not required by our bylaws that we even.
Correct.
have
Yes, we've done it all different ways. Yep. Phil did it in the past. We've had help to do it. Rod's done a great job doing it. Rod, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm just going to preface my comment about that by noting that Jeff's recognizing that he's got connectivity issues and he might drop off.
Okay.
Okay, so just be prepared for that. But mine's shaky, but it's still okay. So yeah, the minute preparation thing for those of you that are new, under the current statutory regulations for posting notices of meetings and then posting draft minutes subsequent to a meeting, under the kind of COVID accommodation provisions that are in effect until January 2023, there are 10 days between the date of the meeting and the need to post draft minutes. That sounds like it's a fairly generous period of time, but actually if you're busy, that can be fairly arduous. And then there's lots of different ways of approaching the task of preparing minutes. And the Planning Commission, as it's currently constituted, appears to like fairly generous amounts of information, so that members of the public now and in the future have a reasonably solid record of the deliberations of the commission and can kind of piece together how things have been done in the past and help inform actions in the future. So the construction of the minutes is a little more demanding perhaps than some other boards or commissions where it's sort of an obligatory function. By law, all you have to do is record the motions and the votes, which would be a very minimalist approach. But because of the discursive nature of the meetings and because of the value of the extemporaneous communication, we've generally erred on having more rather than less. So there's some tasks involved there. There's some timeline things, and there are some content things. And then lastly, we're required to post the minutes on the town's webpage, which should be easy, but actually proves to be an absolute nightmare.
That's actually the hardest part, right, Rod?
Right.
Trying to get it on the website.
Making it work, making it stick, having it there the next day. All these things are issues.
Right.
So if it's not going to be me that does it, then obviously you need to get it to me in enough time, either me or Pam, my assistant, to make sure that it gets up on the webpage. So somewhere in the 8 to 9 day time frame is the current sort of deadline. So that's about it. And if people have got questions, I'm happy to answer them. I would say at this point it would be useful in the short term to find somebody else that was able to do it apart from me. Of course, we do expect to hire a planner, and then the planner would be attending meetings, and then they would happily go back to you would happily go back to them being in that function.
Yeah. Right. And with that build up, do we have anyone that can help?
Yeah, I really know how to
Rod out?
sell a job.
Thanks, Rod.
Yeah.
You really sold it really well. Oh, geez. Anyway, we're trying to get you some help, but I don't think it's going to work. Is there anyone here who'd be willing to help out until we get a planner on board? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I guess I'll nominate Rod to keep doing it.
Okay. All right, Rod, you sold it. You get it.
So I'll make a motion to appoint
Okay.
Rod as our clerk.
Mhm. Okay. Do we have a second? Okay, Ernie, second. Thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, we'll call the question then. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes, for me.
Ernie?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, Jeff has, I guess, had to leave us. Okay, are we ready now to move to number 5? I think we are. Okay, great. We got 7:30. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to just thank Ernie and Brian. Jeff Lubell also contributed, and I put in some questions on the general section. And so I thought we'd take some time to go through some highlights that were drafted in the notes that Rod sent out with the packet. And one of the topics that came up just by observation is that first section, the purpose section. And was it complete enough? Did it need to have more things in it? It wasn't exhaustive. It didn't have all the things from the plan, the town plan. And then Ernie, I know one suggestion you had was maybe we don't need all that detail. The first sentence could stand on its own since it was so inclusive. And yeah, so Rod, you had some thought on that it was important to include some details, but it wasn't necessary to include all details. I don't know if I've paraphrased that correctly, but could you talk on that point?
On the point of what to include in the purpose statement?
Yes. Mhm.
Yep. Okay, so it doesn't have to be exhaustive. The language that was provided in the purpose statement as it stands is a pretty standard set of concerns and considerations that in a very generalized sense connect back to the principles contained in statute. So what I'd say is that towns may choose to add, that's probably okay. Subtracting is probably a little bit more problematic, but it seems like there is some interest in adding some things. And I think I think that for instance, the question of whether to include something on affordable housing is fine. And my remark about that is just that it can be included by reference by citing the act and the town plan, and that works fine. I think that the language about not burdening future landowners or the town with unreasonable maintenance costs is an actually explicit reference to the unintended consequences of poorly planned and reviewed subdivisions. So that if you imagine a more urban kind of setting than Norwich, so imagine that you've got a town in Vermont somewhere that's got water and sewer and schools, and somehow, I mean, it's inconceivable, particularly outside of Chittenden County, but just imagine for the sake of the discussion that somebody proposes a 300 house subdivision. Well, something on that scale, if it was built out fairly quickly, would certainly tax the town's ability to maintain the roads, maintain the water and sewer, and even provide enough classrooms for the school children. So it's kind of a catch-all provision that kind of warns people in the, sort of flags at the beginning of the land use regulations that, look, one of the functions and responsibilities of the Planning Commission and the Development Review Board is to make sure that development doesn't get out ahead of the town's ability to provide basic functions.
Mhm.
It's not intended to be a comment on or connected in any way to property tax and the system of collecting property taxes. So I hope that comment kind of makes that clear.
So it relates specifically to some kind of a development that had unforeseen consequences, or we should foresee them. But anyway, it would have consequences for everybody if it wasn't handled some way. And in those cases, they usually make the developer compensate for that. If the
Right. The way you would do it is you would have, there's different ways that towns do it. One mode is to have what we call a development agreement, which I think is a pretty weak method, but it's common in Vermont. And what that does is stipulate at particular stages or phases of the development that the developer will do certain things. Right. That could be as minimal as planting trees in the, along the, on the edge of the sidewalk, or it could be that they make a contribution to an escrow fund so that the town can then, extend the sewer line or whatever it is. Right. The other way of doing it is to build a decision that explicitly identifies phases and then requires the developer to meet certain deadlines according to phases of development.
Right.
So it's really particular to development. It's not a question of general, like I said, the sort of general tax environment or something such as that.
Mark, does that answer it for you? Because I know that you were you raised that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I know Ernie has his hand up. Ernie, do you mind if I just clarify this question really quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead, and then we'll talk to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm not saying I'm for this, but Rod, if I understand it correctly, if it's doing something which leads to burdenment, and I feel like not doing something is leading to burdenment in this case. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably using the word wrong. But like, I feel like because there's no development, guess what? Everyone's taxes is going to go straight up. And I'm not even saying that we need development. But I guess, Rod, I hear your point. That sounds like it does not apply. That's my simple takeaway. But it does feel like it's still confusing in that, oh gosh, because the population stay the same, because the demographics have stayed the same, the state is saying, hey, let's redo how we do the math. And our town is going to get severely taxed in the next 2 years. Like everybody's property taxes are going to see significant uptick in the next 2 years.
For education taxes.
Yeah, just because we haven't, because the opposite, we haven't developed.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what the state wants, but that's what I feel like is coming out of this, the school piece.
Have you ever
Yeah.
thought of it that way, Ron? Because it's a pretty unusual, I mean, we haven't been in this situation before. It's pretty unusual.
Well, no, I actually, I spend a lot of time thinking about Mark's point, actually, and I
No,
think it's,
I know that part, but I mean,
I-
in terms of
and I think
referring
it's a
to
really-
this section.
I think it's a really cogent thought, but it doesn't fit this section.
Okay,
So what I'd say there
That's the
is
answer.
that Mark's got a reasonable concern and a reasonable interest. It just doesn't fit this slot. So, yeah, that's what, and if that's acceptable, that's, otherwise I can explain it further.
no,
Yeah.
no,
No,
Thank
that's
you.
helpful. I think the idea is there, but not the right part of this to bring that up.
Yep.
Okay.
Ernie, do you have something
Thanks for
else on-
obliging my
I'm sorry.
questions.
Yep. Ernie, did you have something else on the purpose section?
Yes, I mean, to me, you either include sort of the range, the full range, even if you don't include every single thing, but you go from my point of view, this thing absolutely ignores environmental and climate change considerations, which are right in the land use section of the town plan. And it emphasizes more the manufactured aspects of development, building houses and all that sort of stuff. And that's fine, but that's not the whole thing. That's not all land use planning is about. It is about conservation. It is about forest blocks. It is about farms. It is about sustainability, even though we didn't allow that word into the town plan. You know, we're completely missing the entire scope here. We only get half the scope of what is going on here. And we either include the whole scope or we don't, or we stick with just the simple, this is what what these regulations do. And I don't think there's any, personally, I don't think there's any need to put in all those details. Those are goals.
Mhm.
And they don't really go along with purpose. I mean, they follow purpose, but they aren't exhaustive, and you either put exhaustive or you don't put any. Otherwise, there's a bias here. And I object completely to seeing any kind of a bias in our land use planning regulations. And to me, this is a clear bias in terms of changing the character of it'll change the character of the town. If this is our real purpose, it's going to change the character of the town. And that's not what I want to see.
Ernie, question I have for you, because number 4 in the purpose is protect Norwich rural character. Number 5 is protect environmental quality and important natural resources. Is that not enough? Is that not enough?
Those are completely undefined. I mean, we don't know what, you know, we know what the character is because we see it, but it's not a definable entity. It's not a definable quantity. And the same goes for protect environmental quality, important natural resources. You know,
Well,
the city of Boston can say that it does that too, you know, I mean, in a way, a city, you know, conglomerates and makes it so that there's less, you know, wastage in terms of energy for transporting of things and so on and so on. So you can say that's an environmental thing too. So that is a pretty non-descriptive statement there from my point of view. It allows all kinds of interpretation.
okay, so you're,
And yet other parts are not. They're much more specific. So, you know, again, it goes to, you know, scope here. Either everything has to either get the same treatment or it shouldn't get treated at all.
Mhm.
You know, and we should, and I still think that just saying what the purpose, I mean, I've done enough, you know, legislative drafting that we don't need to put all that stuff in. We put it in as we go along the lines of actually applying the purpose.
so you would advocate eliminating 1 through 9. I'm going to call them examples or whatever,
Yes.
1 through 9 examples,
Yes,
but just leave the first statement.
yes,
Okay.
because I think
And then
they,
you- Okay.
I
Okay.
think they create a bias as to what is important to the town, and that's not fair, because there are other things that are not listed there that are also important to this town, and it's important to a number of people.
Okay.
So I think the way to do it is to just get rid of all that and
Mhm.
let the purpose stand on its own. It's a perfectly valid purpose.
Mhm.
I mean, it says what it does, what it's for. And it says what it's complying with and everything, that it doesn't need to say more.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, I mean, so as I understand it, there is a protocol to include some examples. I don't know how stringent that protocol is.
It's not a stringent protocol. I
Mhm.
think I think it's done. I think it's done, but I think, I'm familiar enough with town politics, and I don't mean just this town's politics, to know that, you can twist things if you want to, by saying something is,
Okay,
I just don't want to see that kind of bias in this thing.
okay. Do any others have a comment or question for Ernie on this? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think Mark started to make a good point earlier, Ernie, that's germane to what you're saying, which is that the town's character has changed and has been changing. You look at any of the data presented in last night's Affordable Housing Subcommittee Public Education meeting, which we'll talk about later. Over the past couple decades and accelerating, the only development that's happening in town is large, expensive houses far away from town on large parcels. And that's during that period was your service on the DRB. And so when you're making like project by project decisions, the whole point of this section is to say, well, to the extent that we have any discretion, to the extent that we are able to interpret the meaning and the intent of the rules here that we see here, what are we trying to achieve? I think it is really valuable to have that. Otherwise, you get like project by project decisions and change without realizing it. And that's what has happened. So, I agree in general that the purpose should reflect the town plan, because that's like a fact that's a shared vision. It was approved by this group, by the select board. But to say that, we should have no guidance, no qualitative normative guidance for the degree of discretion or flexibility that the DRB has, I just disagree with that, because then we get what we have now, which is change without realizing it. And so I think it's important to have here. I don't know for sure that we have the right list here enumerated. I don't know, and luckily we don't have to vote on that tonight. It's a long process, but
Right.
I think it's good to have some normative guidance for the DRB in the document.
Well, then I have to say that that's the alternative but it has to have everything. And to a degree, I think you're right about the rural character, the character of the town changing. I would argue, and I don't want to get too into it, but I briefly argue that people moved to this town and are still living in this town because it had a rural character. Okay, and the fact that it's changing, there are people that don't want that to lose the rural character, and you have to ask, somebody's going to have to eventually ask the question, why are people moving into this town? What actually attracts people here? We'll get into that another time. I don't want to deal with that in my argument, but that's not that's not all. I think that particular phrase is really, it's just not it doesn't say anything, the rural character, but the rural character is changing. So what does it guide then? What does it do? But my more important is that, for instance, there are issues about forest blocks. There are issues about farms. Those are part of this town too. And they are, everyone talks about climate change. If you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk, or forget about talking the talk. And climate change has a whole lot to do with forests. It has a whole lot to do with sustainability, the word that we did not allow into the town plan for some reason. And that includes farms. I mean, climate change and transporting vegetables, for instance, or transporting food. All of these, it's a huge ball of issues. But right now, this sort of just is only talking about development. That's all it's talking about is development. It's not talking about any kind of planning other than planning for development. And that to me is a bias that I think has no place in a town like Vermont, Norwich, in Vermont, in a state like Vermont. And I think you either have to count on putting in more about the environmental issues as well, or you have to take out the stuff, well, all of this stuff just about. I mean-
So Ernie, thank you. I know you pointed that out in your email that you sent, and I know it's important to you. I want to suggest a little bit of homework, okay, for our, as we pick this up at the next meeting, is everybody would please take another look at this purpose section, okay? And read through it and think about the town plan and the objectives, the important goals and objectives in the town plan. Are there things that we would add or change given this dialogue that we just had, okay? And we'll start up our discussion at the next meeting with that question. Are there things that you would change in this purpose section? Given all you heard tonight, you know, on top of what you studied before you got to the meeting and what you submitted in terms of comments, how would you change this purpose section? Okay, Mark, you have a question? Yeah.
Sorry, take three, unmute. So I guess it's more of an observation, so you can cut me off because I know we're like way over schedule. One, Ernie, I appreciate your thought. Like I was looking at this for the first time. Like I read parts of this years ago when I built a house, and it seemed like, okay, seems like I can do what I want to do. Great, I can move forward. Given your context, I think there's two parts that jump to me. One is like there's the land use, and then there's the development regs. And my hypothesis, thinking out loud, is that the land use part should address some of those environmental factors that you're talking about. And the development regulations, I think by necessity and just by the definition, that says like what maybe we're capable of. And like I didn't look at this document with that lens for this meeting, but I guess that's my takeaway hearing your comments. And I guess I appreciate that perspective. I hadn't looked at it in that angle. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Okay. All right, so everybody's clear then for the next meeting. We're going to take a look at this purpose section and anything that we would, you know, let's get as specific as you can, please. Are there sentences you would add here? Are there sentences you would modify? Ernie, if we want to include, if we are to include this purpose section, how could this be adapted that would get to more of what you think is necessary? That will be helpful. And then I also want to ask you to revisit the rest of the notes that Rod provided in response to a lot of the comments and questions that came up about the group homes, the discontinued uses, the abandoned development. You'll see it on the last, I think it's 2 or 3 pages of this discussion document that was in the packet. Okay, I can resend that to make, I know everything gets glued together in the package. So with a PDF, I'll send that separately so you have it, so we can review that and we'll pick up the discussion there. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. I want to just move on now to our announcements, reports, director's update. We have a bunch of those, and why don't we just start quickly. Brian, as we said at our last meeting, there was an opportunity to meet with Two Rivers on childcare, the childcare study. You want to talk about how that went?
Yeah, it was great. We met with Kevin and discussed the findings. He clearly had read and digested the Child Care Committee's report, which was great. And the reason we had sought them out was because the report makes it clear that it's a regional, it's a national issues and challenges, but really requires regional collaboration to make meaningful change. And, you know, regardless of, you know, how well-intentioned we are as a town, you know, even big acts by us could be either counterproductive or not systemically important. And so he encouraged us to go further, to encourage our select board to take up some of the recommendations that the report makes in terms of establishing a continuous ongoing group around childcare and some of the other recommendations. And so Yeah, it was just an encouraging conversation. I wouldn't say there's like any immediate next steps in terms of Two Rivers' own activities in this area, but it was good to have his engagement on the issue and recognition that it's important alongside some of the other issues that Two Rivers deals with.
Thanks, Brian. And while you're at it, any questions for Brian on that? Let's see. You want to just slip into the Affordable Housing Subcommittee? Thank you.
Yeah, so last night we had the first of what we hope are 2 or 3 public education sessions during the course of the town plan, or in parallel with the town plan development process now 2 years ago. That group, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, and then ultimately this group developed a housing strategy for the town that was included as an appendix in the town plan. And so it too was approved by the select board. And so this was an opportunity. It's nominally a 5-year strategy, and we're now nearly 2 years into it. So it was just an opportunity to refresh public awareness of that document and make people aware of the work that the subcommittee has been doing in line with the kind of work plan laid out by the strategy. The immediate goal was to draw awareness to the select board's consideration at their meeting tomorrow of the memo that we as the Planning Commission sent them, recommended they consider kind of green lighting further investigation of some town and fire district owned land for potential use for affordable housing. So we were really happy to see the turnout, in addition to the kind of members of the group and members of this group. We had maybe 12 or 15 folks from kind of all parts of town and all experiences show up and ask really good questions. And it was just, it was what we hoped, which was to renew attention, renew energy on this issue, and to kind of get folks re-engaged ahead of the select board's consideration tomorrow night. So happy to talk more about that issue, about the subcommittee, and I guess we'll wait to see what the select board decides to do after tomorrow.
Great. Any questions for Brian? Yeah, it's great that it's on the agenda, Brian. Thanks. Okay. All right. Rod, you want to give us your report?
Sure. Thanks, Jackie. So just a quick note. So those of you that are using the PDF version of the agenda, that's a hot link to the ARPA presentation that Sarah Rake from Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission made to the select board probably a month or so ago now. That's actually right now sitting on the Planning Commission webpage for those of you that are going to find it some other way. It's just sitting there amongst the packets and so forth right now. So that's a useful overview for towns in Vermont with regard to ARPA funds and how it's going to be managed. You should know that we were required to do our first reporting out to the US Treasury, and like most other towns in the country, we haven't started to spend it yet. And we certainly haven't finished talking about how to do that. So the select board moving forward will be identifying projects that would be eligible for the use of these funds and talking with the community more broadly about what those priorities of the select board are and what the townspeople feel is important as well. Like, again, most communities in the United States, you can characterize a lot of the capital assets of the town of Norwich as having deferred maintenance. And so while $1.1 million sort of sounds like a lot, it could be rapidly absorbed into just moving the ball a little bit forward, catching up on deferred maintenance in a range of locations. So I welcome people's questions and comments about that, and hope to see some of you participating in the processes of the select board on that one. The select board also needs to make a decision with my support about a steering committee for the wastewater treatment, the wastewater feasibility study, I should say. That's coming up. That'll probably be not tomorrow night, but the next select board meeting at the end of the month. And that's also something to look forward to. We look forward to working with the consultants on that work. The work coming from the density study, haven't had time to get back to Max and others to go through the kind of comments and feedback that we got the last time. And I particularly want to call out and appreciate Brian's feedback on the presentation. That was really useful. So I hope to see some development there between now and our next meeting. And then, as you can probably tell, given the number of roles that I'm fulfilling right now, the focus, I think, going forward for me in support of the Planning Commission is going to be focusing on the wastewater feasibility study and the land use regulations. The other projects that have been identified and slated for Planning Commission involvement, including the paths and trails work that was identified with a action item in the town plan, and has also received interest in the wake of the Beaver Meadow Road sidewalk proposal that was examined by Du Bois and King a couple of years ago now. The outcome from the annual town meeting was that there would be a so-called phase 2 study that would be undertaken, and that phase 2 study would explore the relationship between any bike and pedestrian improvements on the Beaver Meadow Road in the context of Huntley Meadow and the broader setting of the village and immediate surroundings in terms of improving bike and pedestrian facilities. And the funding for that study don't become available until July 1, because that's when the budget starts. And that study would need to be supported by a staff person. That staff person is going to be the new planner. So we have to hire a new planner between now and then and get them onboarded and ready to do that. So there's very limited scope to take up those kinds of questions and issues until those things are in place. And we're extremely busy doing other things between now and July. So it's not to say that it's not important. It's not to say that it's been filed or pushed off. It's a question of how you implement the articles from town meeting and the budget necessary to do that, as well as getting the staffing on board to be able to do that. So that's something that I'd like to be able to discuss in a little more detail as time goes by. But flag it definitely as something that's going to be a summertime activity. And that brings me to my last point, which is given the workload that I'm currently dealing with, I think that it would be a rare moment in a planning commission's recent history where you should contemplate taking a month off for summer, while recognizing that at least 2 of you are very new. And this is your big chance to kind of get to know us as a group of people and the work that we do. But I would suggest at this point that it might be beneficial to take at least August as a, take a break, or at least begin to discuss how many of you are going to be around and what those issues are going to be. It's pretty common at some point in the summer that we kind of get a little shaky around the question of quorum and those kinds of things. But so that's the suggestion of mine, just to be really selfish about it, try and ease my workload, but also try and recognize that, there's not until we've got a new budget and a new planner that it's a real struggle to keep up.
Thanks for that, Rod. Other questions for Rod about ARPA, the wastewater study, the density study? We'll deal with the calendar in a minute. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, Vince beat me. Vinchingo.
Yeah, go ahead, Vince. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Rod, you mentioned the phase 2 sidewalk study. Was there supposed to be some sort of subcommittee or something associated with that? And is that just on hold until the new planner gets in, or what's the story on that?
Right. So that's something that needs. So the Planning Commission and the Conservation Commission are both identified in the town plan as entities that would be involved in developing a so-called master plan for paths and sidewalks in town. And that goes back, I'm not sure how long you've been here, Vince, but it goes back to a particular period in time and a suggestion. I want to say, Jackie might be able to help me out. I want to say it was in the 2018, 2019 timeframe, where people were proposing actually improving paths and trails as a way of encouraging alternative forms of transportation in and out of the village relative to cars on the road.
Hyperloops?
Something like that. Yeah. Time, space travel, some form, anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to Vince's point, I think at some point in the first quarter, I don't know when it was, February, March, or whatever, we looked at this group looked at a scoping document to get that committee off the ground, and yes, there will be a committee to do that for sure, and bring in all the parties. I guess the thought I have on that is I'd like to bring the scoping document back to this group at our June meeting, okay, to take a look at that. It's not easy to get these committees off the ground, and so maybe we could sharpen our pencils, see what we can do to add to that, and start asking, thinking about who would be the best people on it. We have volunteers already, but who else do we need? Do we have the right people? Just to start getting interest in that, so that I'd like to hit the ground running when our new planner comes on board. I don't want to, and I think that is some pre-work, if you will, that we could get done as a planning commission to really lay down a framework for that committee and how it's going to work. I think would be time well spent, and could help our new person who comes on board.
right, and then the other part about that is that we have to develop an RFP or an RFQ.
Yeah, right.
To find consultants that are going to undertake the study.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
the
there's
study, right.
there's a lot of steps that need to.
There's a lot of different steps, but I think I'd like to see us start to formulate that committee, so that we're ready, ready to get that done, ready to get that done. Mark, you had something? Go ahead. Yep.
It might be a simple question for you, Rod. I saw Sarah's presentation. I thought it was great. I couldn't help but connect the dots of, oh, this ARPA money can be used for, wastewater. Gosh, we have a wastewater study going on. Like, I assume that's not us making that decision, but that's you or the select board or someone else. Can you talk a little bit about that, just so I know?
Well, look, narrowly, the good news about the study is that through a very convoluted process, it's effectively free.
Oh, I saw that. That's great.
Yeah, it's a bit unbelievable. I'm
a good loan reimbursement.
Yeah, it is total loan forgiveness, which is just weird. But anyway, so let that one slide. If the study comes out with some findings that were actionable in terms of a project, the timeline may fit ARPA, and then the question of $1 million doesn't get you very far. Should be sort of kind of inappropriately rude about it. Like, you get some engineering time, but you don't get a lot else. So it may be a boost, but I think that the focus for the ARPA money is somewhere else, on the basis that it's understood, first of all, that we're not really clear if projects are going to get recommended, and then what it could be used for in the context of how much things cost is another question. But it certainly helps, in other ways, I guess, indirectly, But the study would conclude probably in time. So it's actually, but it's just a question of, I think, what you get in terms, you certainly wouldn't get very much treatment ability or capacity,
Yeah.
if that's what you're thinking. But yeah,
I
that's a
know
good
that-
point.
The ventilation at Town Hall, I know, has been a project on the to-do list for quite some time now.
Yeah,
I don't know
Yeah.
if you were all here then. I think, Mark, you were, and Vincent, you may have just been coming into town, but it was voted to fix the town hall, and then it was taken away, and, you know, that happened in March, then in August, it was voted down, and so we never
Right.
got any of the work done, and that was in 218 or 219, something like that.
yeah. So yeah, there remains a mystery as to how a building that is so cold and drafty can also have inappropriately putrid indoor air quality. It's sort of, it remains a scientific puzzle to me that it's no different from the outside on the inside for half the year, and yet when you measure the air quality, it's a fail. So I just, yeah, anyway, it's, yeah.
Okay.
I don't quite understand it yet.
Any other
Right.
questions for Rod? Any other discussion on the updates?
Can I just go really specific? I guess,
Sure, go ahead.
I would, yes, I was curious about the septic, but my understanding is this, the ARPA stuff that you talked about, like that's not on our plate. That's the select board stuff to take care of, not ours, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, at that level, yes. And then what I would say that we should be serious about for a moment is that the money, there's a lot of money in the state. And so one of the reasons why we're not paying for the study is that the state's already benefited from federal money that basically means that they can be that generous.
Got it.
It means that if we were going to do a project or something, and I want to caution that we haven't come to any conclusions yet, so got to really hold off on that
We
temptation
haven't
to
done the
say.
study yet. We haven't
They
even.
haven't done the study, so we don't know what we're doing. But if there, you know, there is money around, but I do want to emphasize, like, really emphatically, no one's made any conclusions yet. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, good. So then that brings us to approving our minutes from April 12th. I guess, Vince and Mark, you weren't here. So, and Ernie has, his water pump broke. I just got a message from him. So Ernie has left us. So can we vote for the minutes with just 3 of us here? I think we don't have.
This is one of the, you've got 2 choices. If you want to be,
Did we get
if
up
you-
2 abstain, right? Okay, go ahead. Yep.
right, if you want to be very cautious, you
Right.
can just leave the minutes until the next meeting and just say that there was no longer a quorum. Or you can take a more liberal view of Robert's rules, which is to say, you're all legitimate members of the body. If you believe these are a reasonable representation of the last meeting, you could vote for it. But given that at least 2 of you weren't there, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it's up to you. And Melissa's got a hand up. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Oh,
either.
yeah.
No,
Oh, that's
but-
right. That's right. That's
Right.
right. I forgot. That's
it
right.
might be
There's-
better. It might be a better look just to leave it.
I'm
There's
happy to
one
leave it.
edit, though, that I have. I think you have me approving like the
Oh.
agenda or something. So while we're at it, you could just.
I knew you would approve it if you saw it.
I totally would have been behind that agenda if I could have been there.
So
It
You're
was
right,
probably a carryover from the month before. He forgot to change the name.
You sit there and say in spirit, I definitely did.
I felt that you would really recommend this kind of agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the kind of agenda I support. But yeah,
Okay.
Any other notices of your name that you want to point out? Did we use your name in vain, Melissa?
luckily you didn't put it in the notes if you did. So I appreciate that. But I won't go back to the recording to see. But yeah. So,
All right. All right. So any other, so we'll hold off on that one. Any other business for this evening? Any other business? Anything we didn't talk about that we should have? Going once, going twice. If not, in terms of our future meeting schedule, we have a June 14th and a July 12th and an August 9th, and Rod is suggesting a month off for the summer. I love the idea. He's suggesting August. Is anybody, that gives Vince and Mark a chance to have 2 meetings under their belt. You know, looking into my crystal ball, if we hire a town planner, hopefully, I don't know, between now and July or whatever, August off, and then hit the ground running in September. What, it seems like it might be a cadence, but it's only a crystal ball. Brian, you had something to say?
On one level, I'd like everyone to be forced to come to the meeting on August 9th to wish me happy birthday. But on another level, especially given how the increasing complexity of the sections in the land use, I think just having more time to digest some of that stuff and make comments would be beneficial as well. So I'm happy to take that month off from a meeting if it means we can spend a bit more time ourselves doing some more.
Okay.
And I would just encourage Mark and Vince in particular, but anybody else, just to give me a call, and now that the weather's better, we can go for a walk or something, and talk through the issues, or you can get up to speed. I'm happy to do that if you're around during the day, or early evening or whatever works for you guys. But
Yeah, Rod needs to get out, so please
yeah.
please take him up on that.
Yeah, I'm losing. I keep on suffering. I lose circulation in my legs.
He really needs to get up and walk, so please take him up on
You can do
that.
that. When does the air get bad?
around about 7:30 in the morning. It stays.
Yeah. Gotcha.
All right.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll take you up on it.
Okay, great.
Okay, so no meeting August 9th for Brian's birthday. Are we sad about that? It's okay? All right. All right, very good.
Do I second that? Is that a
Yeah,
motion?
I think we can have consensus is fine. And then in terms of the June schedule, what's on our agenda? We have the, as we just talked about, we're going to work through the purpose statement and the other notes in the discussion document that was circulated and that will circulate again. And then the update on how do you want to do this, Rod? Do you want to have the closeout to the density, or or next steps on wastewater is what really is most
We'll
important?
probably go next step on wastewater.
Yeah, let's do that. I agree, because the closeout on the density will be very important before we do the land use regs, but up until we've seen enough for that. So,
Sure.
okay, next steps on wastewater, and then how do we all feel about if we bring back, I bring back the scoping document that we reviewed a draft of a couple months ago. Two of you weren't here. I'd like to go over that and see if we can't, tune that up, okay?
For
So that
June.
we can start recruiting people this summer and be able to get that thing off the ground. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Great. And the scoping document can change over time, but we want to get something out there. All right. Anything else for the June agenda? That sounds like a lot already. So, okay. All right. If something comes up between now and then, let us know, or we'll hear about it. Okay. All right.
Can I ask you a quick question, Jackie?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I know we started going through like a small section today. Again, not having been through this, I assume that if we all read on our own, do some prep, then show up for even a half hour or an hour discussion, it's gonna take us like a year to get through like 6 pages. Is there like a different process that works, or is this the process that we're signing up for? And I'm fine with it. I manage my own expectations.
No, you make a very good observation, and then the other, right, doing this with all the other topics on the agenda, it's really problematic because inevitably, something that we think is going to take 10 minutes on the agenda, takes us a half hour, all right, and then and then the half hour or the 45 minutes we were going to spend on the document is now down to like 25 minutes. So I agree with you, and I think we should consider have an off-site, if you will, or an on-site, or do something, go somewhere and work on this document for an extended period of time, half a day, or, anyway, that's an option, one option that we could think about to try to focus the mind and get ourselves through it. Melissa, do you have any suggestions on that? Because I know you've been through this enough times with the town plan and with the other things that we've worked on approval.
I mean, I really liked how you had it organized and that you put together the spreadsheets and that people had time to comment. And sorry, I totally blew that deadline. I looked at it the next weekend, and
Right.
so I screwed that one up this last
Yeah.
time. But
Yeah.
but I don't know how to
Mhm.
keep people on track. I mean,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
we've tried using like time limits before, and we've tried using like the pieces of paper to speak, but it seems like we're just going off the rails.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If this were the only topic on the agenda, that's another, just to help us focus.
I think it's just gonna fill the, I don't see how we're not gonna just fill the time that whatever is on there,
Mhm.
just going back and forth and back and forth.
I see. So you see that as the key thing. It's hard to move on from different points that are repeated sometimes more than once.
Yeah, that's where I see the problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No, sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Because
no.
like, I just, if I use your example, right? Like I read Ernie's notes beforehand and I was like, okay, I thought that meant one thing. And then when he described it today, I was like, oh, that I didn't think about that. Because I just read it. Like, so he said it in a way that made me think of it differently. And there's some good points in there. Like I hadn't thought about it, but I didn't read that when I just read the email notes. And I just wonder, like, some of that stuff, it's really hard when you're just reading notes and you almost have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Vince?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Vince, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're kind of dealing with two different topics that will bring up, because I mean, a lot of it is some of that was in the correspondence, like that there's double negatives or this is unclear.
Mhm.
But then there's kind of a lot of just like the spirit of the document, and like that's more of a discussion based. So
Yeah.
I know
Good
that
point.
they can kind of get. So I just wasn't sure if there's some sort of like this designated time that we're talking about. Just I wasn't sure how this goes along. Like,
Right.
are we just nitpicking words here or there, or do we need to set a time to specifically talk about
Yeah.
big picture, kind of like what we did today?
Yeah, good point. It's tough to do both.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
from my perspective, because I've been through this now a couple of times, with different documents, different things, but raising it to the level of discussion topic, I think, like, what is the purpose statement for, and what's the monitoring process? When is it okay to have variances? Those seem to me like discussion topics. I think in terms of the, let's call it the nitpicking or the grammar or whatever, I guess I would leave that to the writer. Here's the feedback. This sentence is confusing. Can you clarify this sentence? I don't need, unless they don't understand what I said. I would trust the writer to do that. And then when I see the next draft, I think I will understand it better. So that, I mean, that's a way to be more efficient with our time. I don't want to talk about the grammar, but maybe somebody else does. So I don't know if that clarifies anything, but if we could keep it at the level of discussion topics, that's what I call it. I think that's helpful. Go ahead, Vince.
I was just wondering what the mechanics of getting the correspondence in. I appreciated everybody's notes that we got out. Is that something we need to send to Rod by a certain deadline before the meeting, or how?
Oh, you mean the last go round when we collected topics on the, I'm sorry, we collected comments on those general section land use regulations? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, there were just a couple. It was just some things that you wrote, just this section's unclear, and then
Yeah.
something that Brian annotated and something Ernie wrote about. Is that just
Right.
something we need to email directly to Rod, or what do we need to do if there's something along, before next week?
Yeah. Well, I guess the way we had set that up, and I had asked people to send me their comments. I then collated them and sent them
Okay.
off to Rod, then Rod responded to them. One thing we have to be very careful of, Vince, with open meeting law is we can't be having like discussions among ourselves. We could send documents to each other, but we can talk about agendas, but we don't want to be discussing any topics on email between like two of us or all of us, or anyway. That's against open meeting law. So we try to keep everything open, and we can collate things, put them out in our package, talked about them at our meeting. So I don't know if that part was confusing to you, the route of the documents, but that was the reason.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was that reason. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've tried this a variety of ways. At one point, we were on a big screen, all editing at once, and that was an absolute nightmare. Like oh my God.
That was the old days.
That was the very old days.
It was the
and that
very
did not-
old days. Those were very dark days.
That did not work.
And we're still on the planning commission. Can you believe it? No.
No. Yes.
Oh, my God. All right. All
So,
right. So then tell me again, though, in terms of dealing with this document and June, what would you like to see done differently in June? That would be helpful.
I like Vince's comment that maybe there's 2 or 3 discussion points that we say, hey, we'd like to discuss these 2 or 3 things, knowing that
Yep.
they may not get us far, but like these are
Okay.
up for discussion, and maybe not some of the semantics or grammar
Yep.
or wording. And then like I think that's a product, like if we're all getting together, that's a productive use of our time to actually discuss some of those things.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
managing that discussion obviously is like, hurting us cats, but thanks Jackie for volunteering, or
Right,
thanks Brian for nominating you to do that again.
right. Okay, all right. Rod, you had a comment?
Yeah, just that the the system that I think works the best. First of all, I think that unfortunately, adjusting your expectations about how fast this can go is probably part of it. And it's important to go through, as slow or as fast as people can cope with, right? So it's one of those situations where, sometimes you'll struggle over a paragraph for a whole meeting. And then the next time you're together, you'll rush through 20 pages and people just go, yep, that's all good, and then there'll be another paragraph and everyone just like grinds to a halt. So I would break out the comments that you witnessed tonight, and both verbally and then also in the written form as being either framed either in a sort of a philosophical sense or a sort of a engaging directly with the document sense. So, saying something like, I'm not sure if this works, or help me understand what this is about, are useful conversation questions. But a long kind of philosophical difference about the whole purpose of the document, maybe at this point is not necessarily going to allow for meaningful forward progress, right? So I think one of the things I can do for you as new commissioners is send you some examples, just links probably, to other towns' land use regulations. Some of them are really old and some of them are really awful, and some of them are newer and some of them are better. And it sort of takes a little bit of time to sort of just sit with it and go, okay, there's a whole lot of things pushing in on this document. There's statute, there's case law, there's local custom and practice and expectations. There's the quality of the information that people have at their disposal. It's how new the document is. There's all these variables that help explain better or worse land use regulations. And so what when I introduce a new section, what I do is I attempt to introduce it in terms of, I use this metaphor of like you've got a piece of equipment. The document I describe as a piece of equipment, and it's got a set of dials, and you can set these dials at certain points. And the reason why you might want to think about these dials is that you get different outcomes by wherever you put the dial. But there are certain things in each section of this document that basically is black box. You can't touch it because it's statute or case law. So that's generally the way I introduce it. And then if people just go with that metaphor and go, okay, you've told me that there's 3 knobs I can play with tonight.
Right.
What are those 3 knobs? And then I'll introduce the issues as impartially as I can about the pros and cons of adjusting the knob up or down, right? Making it tighter, making it looser. So just think of it in those terms. You can make really tight regulations and there are consequences. You can make really loose regulations and there are consequences. So we're just adjusting basically the tension. If you think about it in those terms and then just want to go along, you go with the flow for a while, then you can engage in the what if scenarios or the examples and go, oh, okay. And then sometimes you can back out to it and go, well, Norwich has got a really deep commitment to this, whatever it is, agricultural landscapes, open space, whatever it is. If it was a different town like Hartford, you might be having a different kind of discussion about trying to promote a particular kind of development in downtown White River Junction, or preventing a certain kind of development in White River Junction. Like you might say, that's enough car dealerships. We don't want any more car dealerships. How do we write regulations to basically make that difficult? So that will be your knob scenario where you just adjust them to sort of prevent that from happening. The context for Norwich is really complicated because 97% of the whole land area of Norwich is one zoning district. And we're going to get onto that pretty soon. And that's kind of a problem because obviously there's a lot of variation within that 97% of land area. So 97% is rural residential, but one piece of rural residential can look really different from another piece. So it's that's kind of a philosophical problem on one level, but it's a very practical problem on another. So that's where I really appreciate feedback and input from you as commissioners. And that's the way I attempt to present it, that it's just, think of it as a box. We're trying to make this box work. And you get to play with the dials for a while.
So I'll work with Rob. We'll try to frame it, and Brian will try to frame it that way at the next meeting. I think that was a good analogy. And where do we have the room and the knobs? But and then, as I say, if you do notice grammatical things, that's fair game. Just
Yeah,
because
totally.
that helps the
Yeah.
writer. But we don't need to hear about it in the meeting. But that does help the writer. And then your questions about it also, I think, are really helpful just in terms of building all of our understanding. So I think if we commit to just refamiliarizing ourselves with the materials in time for the next meeting, and Rod and Brian and I will try to frame it in terms of these knobs and where we have leeway. We'll see if that gets us on track with a good discussion. Okay. Thank you all for your time and patience this evening. I appreciate it. And do we have any public comment? I see Linda's phone is still there. It's gray now. It used to be green, so I don't know if that means something else. Linda, you there? Hearing nothing.
And I have not fallen asleep. I've been listening to it. And I think you guys have had a very productive meeting tonight. It was
Thank you
great.
so much, Linda. Oh my God, you're a star.
Wow, it's impressive. That's really-
It is impressive. Our public is still with us. I'm so happy. All right. Do we hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second. Thank you, Brian. I
I
heard a
second
second from
that.
Melissa. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. And I'll see you June 14th, if not before. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Bye
Appreciate it.
now.